Right. Hello, friends. Welcome to another episode of the Testing Peers podcast. My name is Chris Armstrong, and today, this morning, whenever you're listening, I am joined by the one David Maynard.
Hello.
The two Russell Cracksford.
Why, aye.
And the three Dan Ashby.
Hello.
He said goodbye before his hello. It's all very well unsensible here today. Today we're going to be speaking about flow, optimizing flow, providing value, showing value, all those good things. Good luck to whoever's making the title for this episode. But before we dive into that one, Dan, you've got us a little bit of banter.
I do, yeah. And since it's New Year, I want to hear about any New Year resolutions that you have.
Oh, New Year resolutions every year.
I can give you mine. Mine's relatively an easy one that I've been working on, which is just get healthier. It's not got a very defined outcome, but it's end the year healthier than I start the year. So lose weight, be stronger, whatever it is, just be slightly better than I was the year before. Positive trends.
Mine is very similar. Although, yeah, so I've sort of given up a little bit on running, but I've got a half marathon in March. So I need to put some training in that. And also I keep going on about the calisthenics, and I did I've done quite well just before Christmas. But I've hurt my back, so I've had a couple of weeks off, so I need to try and get back into that. So it's getting healthy and hopefully avoiding injuries in both running and general fitness.
I think every year I try and start a nice trend where I get to read at least a chapter of a book for pleasure every single day. And every year I get a certain way through and then I drop off. So probably what I'd like to be able to do is a bit of both. I'd like to write more regularly and I'd like to read more regularly. And again, on both counts for pleasure. There's stuff we do for work. We write bits and bobs all the damn time. But I want to write a bit more for pleasure. It's been a while since I've done that. You know, I spent a lot of previous years writing for purposes of brand awareness or hey, look at me, give me a job, whatever I needed to get done at the time. I'd quite like just to be like talking about this is the thing that I find interesting. Let's have a bit of a chat.
What about
So
you, Dan?
sounds fabulous, yeah. Mine's is actually a bit of all of yours. So, yeah, the health one, Russell, like, I think that's a common one every year for me, and I just, it's an aspiration more than anything. But also, like, I've found my writing mojo as well, Chris. Like, so getting back into that, I'd like to try and do more sort of side projects from a development perspective, like building a bit of a profile website, for example, or seeing some of these sort of app ideas that I've got. Now it's easier with these AI tools. So doing a bit of vibe coding maybe. That'd be good.
And of course, you're looking forward to being program committee for PeersCon 26 and being there, be your first time at the event, won't it?
It will be, yeah, yeah. I took a bit of a break from testing conferences for a while. I'm trying to get into the dev ones and remain active in the agile ones, but I'm so excited about this. Like, I'm really excited about it because it's been a while since a testing conference, and I've missed it a bit, you know?
It's the way I think we all felt a bit of that in pandemic times as well, didn't we, when we didn't get to
Yeah.
go to anything. Or we could talk about all these sorts of fun things going on, but there is something that um I proposed as a topic to sort of dive into today. It's a lot about what I've been thinking about, and we talk about testers and quality, so we're going to just put that semantic bit just in a little corner over here to sort of talk more about the things that we can do to, or as testers, we might be drawn to do to optimize flow, look for ways to show that we're providing value in the workplace rather than just being the folks at the very end reporting on numbers of things. So maybe leaning more into qualitative items, preventative, mitigation, risk-informed areas. I've planted a lot of seeds there, but it's something that I've been really kind of chewing on quite a lot recently and thinking that there's a lot of value add in the instincts that we have, the places that we find ourselves as testers. So that's kind of my opening gambit. I had a couple of nods from people, so I feel like there's something there.
Then silence.
Well, I've got a lot that I could
Go on,
say,
Dan.
but
Start us off,
I
Dan.
was wanting to hear you first.
No.
No,
We all
flow's
thought
an
that, therefore
interesting
no
one.
one spoke.
Flow's a really interesting one, right? Because a lot of people work in today's world, a lot of people talk about speed, like we must move faster. And a lot of companies tend to think of that as do more, like actually take on more. But the way that I think about flow is kind of like a plumbing system, for example, right? So you're not just you can't just force more water through the pipes, right? You need to refactor the design of the pipes, think about the actual width of the pipes themselves, in a working context. So that equates to like your processes, the quality of your processes, so not just the speed that you're moving at, but like even how iterative you are, like breaking things down into smaller chunks, reducing those long feedback loops to make them much shorter, right? So things like pairing and ensembling helps with improving flow, even although it doesn't really feel like it should, because you're all working in one thing at one time, perhaps with ensembling. So it's a little bit like less intuitive in that sense, but flow is a sort of grander sort of scale of things when you're thinking about not just moving faster. So it's a huge topic, like loads that we can break into.
I always like an analogy, and get that pipe analogy. I'd like to take that one step further because actually it isn't just about the size of a single pipe. It's the number of pipes, and it's the way that the pipes are then convoluted in order to come back together. So it's a bit like sort of system architecture almost, breaking it up. And also, if you have a set amount of water, if you have too many pipes, then actually the flow through each particular pipe is greatly reduced. You might have a trickle in all the pipes. And so therefore, actually, your cadence is reduced because of it. And yeah, so I do like that idea. And obviously, it feeds absolutely into flow.
Do you want me to take it even further?
Go on.
I could. Which is, it's not just where the pipes, it's the output of the pipes, because they go into something that can't take the load, take the flow of all the work and all the rest of it. They become the bottleneck that stops the flow. So that you've got to actually organize the whole system, not just maximize your pipes and then have something at the end that can't cope with it, because you can flood, say, a room or whatever it is. So you've got to make sure you think of the system rather than just optimizing all the little individual components.
It's as if someone named these things pipelines for a reason sometimes. But no, the pipelines are more than, like I think we've already touched on. It's more than just your CI/CD pipelines, right? This is like a throughput of work, of process, of appropriateness, appropriate tools for the appropriate places, and there's a different context that's going to require a different tool, a different bend, a different width, a different velocity, a different level of pressure being applied. And I quite like the oft quoted by me Stu Crocker's quality being the removal of unnecessary friction. Like you wouldn't want always for your pipes to have it be free flowing in relentless forms if it wasn't appropriate. And I quite like that sort of level of appropriateness and necessary and unnecessary being sort of brought into that throughput. And just to deviate, I'm sadly away from that particular analogy. I like to sort of think about when we've got things that we need to fix, but things are continuing to work for a while, we're accruing debt. And one bugbear that just gets me, and I just want to get it off my chest, so I'm just going to say it quickly, is like when people talk about tech debt, they think you're just talking about tech stack related debt.
Well, they think about different things, don't they? It depends who you ask. It's entirely. If you ask
Yeah,
an
but
architect,
very
it's one
often
thing.
I've sat
Tester,
there and
it's
said,
one.
we've got tech debt, and people go, oh, well, do you know, we do need to add more memory. I'm like, well, no, the tech debt here is maybe what you could call document debt or culture
Mm.
debt or process debt or something like that. And they just look at you and go, well, that's not a technical problem. And you're like, it is a technical problem. You've just narrowed your scope. But I just wanted to get that off my chest. We can go back to the friction points now.
I think it's really interesting points as well. Like Russell, we can layer on what you said as well, right? In terms of like the cleanliness of the pipes, the dirty pipes, right, produces the dirty output. So that's one
Oh,
aspect.
maintenance.
Oh,
Oh,
tell me about it. But then,
got to
Chris,
flush
you
your pipes.
mentioned as well, like beyond like CICD pipelines, right? Uh, my head immediately doesn't go to pipelines, but everyone in tech, I imagine most people would go to pipelines, but I was actually going to organizational systems. So thinking about even learning mechanisms, right? Really clunky or non-existent learning mechanisms makes it harder for the team to actually grow, which makes it harder for them to improve the output of their work, right, and improve their flow. So every single aspect of the organization is one of these pipes, right?
Yeah, I think you're very right. When we're talking about pipelines in this sense, we were using the analogy just to talk about getting something from A to B, wasn't it, really? Outcome versus necessarily a CI/CD. But you're right. Also, CI/CD is the big pipeline that us within technology often refer to. But again, different people consider different things in the CI/CD pipeline. From release, some include it, some wouldn't. Continuous deployment, continuous delivery. There's all these different sort of variations of all these things. But ultimately, I guess if we think about it as value add, it's what gets in the hands of the customer from somewhere. What you add to the value of the company, the organization, is usually ultimately from buying a product, selling a product, giving a product away, whatever it is. And it's all the organizational aspects from training, development, feeling psychologically safe to actually writing software that deliver that. In our case, it could be manufacturing, it could be one of the other fields out there. But yeah, it's all these things that together create value. And it's interesting because if you think about it, that includes everything from the hiring, the onboarding to every part of the process actually has an important part to play to the whole system. It's scary.
I was also going to say that another thing that's important, as well as the sort of training, is the onboarding. How quickly you can add value to a particular project by the quality of the documentation or whatever on the actual project, for new people coming onto a particular project. The other thing I was going to say was that I think that a lot of companies consider or only look at the output that of particular projects or the actual thing rather than the outcomes. And actually that's where test comes in, is concentrating on that outcome. What does success look like, rather than just actually producing the software or product or whatever the project is trying to do.
Yeah, I was about to say something very similar, David, which was kind of around the metrics around it all, right? We see things like Dora, the Dora metrics it kind of talks about the time aspect of it, still coming back to speed, right? But is there anything that actually you can think of that measures flow, not just speed?
It depends what
Depends
you
on what you
define as
call
flow.
by flow, exactly what I was going to
Yeah,
say. Like,
true. But what we've been
because
talking about is flow, right?
because
Um,
because it's tricky there, isn't it? Because flow is a number of items that are quantifiable, and that's what we're going to be concentrating on naturally, because quantifiable things are by very nature easy to count and therefore easy to report on. So it could be number of work items that move from A, B, C, and how quickly that happens, how long something is
throughput.
static, exactly how long something is static, how responsive something might be when you call upon it. We've got mean time to response, mean time to resolution, things that exist, um, well-known sort of measures that we have. The difficulty that we have comes in that other aspect of things that are less easy to immediately quantify. Things that, like I touched upon, sort of things that are a bit more qualitative, and maybe they're a bit more disparate depending on where you sit in different projects and things, where it's got it's thematically similar, but there's a different context, there's a different um, pathway through to stuff that means that it isn't immediately the same. And I was trying to look at things about saying like you can always trend over time various things if you can work out what good looks like and bad and attribute something akin to an index to something just so you can sort of work out how those things are. But I don't think it's an exact science, but you have to sort of start somewhere because if you don't work out what good looks like and what it is currently, and then how you're sort of trending over time on those things, you're not going to be able to gauge if it's better or worse realistically. And sometimes it's not something you can just count, which is really frustrating because we're almost always asked to just count the things.
Got to boil it down to an OKR, Chris. It's got to have that key result that's measurable, right? I'm joking, but
No, well, you are and you aren't, I guess is the point, isn't it? Really,
I
that's what
know.
makes it humorous. Um, what flow is hard to define, isn't it? It's a multitude of things. It's not one measure. It's probably two or three or four sort of things together. It's things like we've already mentioned, like work in progress. But it's also things like output. So you need both of those things together to kind of understand these things, and it's kind of understanding about gets the change flow rate. So I guess if you go to Dora metrics, it's seeing how fast you can do something and how reliably you can do it, because it's all great having great flow, but if it's overflowing or it's you're piping foul water rather than clean water out, it's not good flow. So you actually start measuring not just what you output, but the value of it. If it's manufacturing, for example, you might measure into it the failure rate, as in how much of what you're producing actually goes in the bin, so that's waste. So it's generally obviously trying to measure the fact that it's good what comes out, the rate in which it comes out, and the time it takes from start to finish to come out, be it whatever the system. That's generally, I think, the three key measures in my head at
It's
least.
almost always got a delta, hasn't it? Like
Yeah,
it's not just an A to B. There's a delta, a qualifier, a piece in the middle that adds richness to the story beyond just the number. Because,
yeah,
I've had questions about X number of test cases written. I'm like, okay,
yeah.
but should we have done? What was
You've
that
written a
measure,
billion. It's great.
that trigger? Like we went through that process that said, should we have done this? Yes.
Yeah.
Then I want to measure it. Did we do it? If we just did it without measuring that, that's not useful.
Yeah, I agree with everything you're saying. I want to kind of take it to a meta level though, where I'm thinking about,
I don't want Facebook involved.
oh, I know, neither.
Oh,
No,
Sorry.
like rather than thinking about it in terms of products, if I'm thinking about it in terms of like an engineer experience or a tester experience, right? So there's a bit of a life cycle here as well. Like I know that for products, we think of a software development life cycle. We go through various activities to build, test, design, whatever. But if we think about it at like a tester experience life cycle, right? There's the recruitment process, then the onboarding, right? Then there's the all the day-to-day stuff that happens that isn't in the SDLC, right? So your ceremonies that you have within your team, the communication, the collaboration, the decision making, the support that you give others, the support that you do in your products even might not even be in SDLC, like on call, right? And then there is an end to the life cycle, which is sort of like the offboarding part. And in between, you've got the growth part as well, right? The learning that I mentioned earlier. This is what I was mean by organizational systems, right? Because there's flow all the way throughout this as well. And yeah, you can measure it in terms of like throughput and um, rates of change and all this kind of stuff as well. And speed, of course, is obviously going to be part of that as well. Like no one wants a lengthy onboarding process, right? Or interview process even right at the start if it takes too long. But thinking about other ways to measure this, it's really challenging. But from an experience perspective, it matters though, right? Like it really matters. And from that product perspective, even it matters to your customers, your clients, and your users. You know.
Even with AI where it is, humans are a key factor of all these systems, and working collaboration and teamwork is still crucial. So,
Mhm.
as you say, the onboarding to the offboarding, the human life cycle, for want of a better
Yep.
word, is crucial. And I guess measuring that is harder. But I guess we try that with feedback loops again, one-to-ones, um, with skip level meetings, with feedback loops, retrospectives, onboarding. Often get asked feedback as you're going about it. Um, I've generally wherever I've worked, I've kind of onboarding documentation is always poor. I'm being polite. So it's kind of like the next person that comes to it, review it, edit it, improve it. Like everyone iterate on it, and actually, it's part of the learning experience. Is you help set the culture, which is if you see something broken, see something's not as good as it could be, contribute, do it,
Yep.
make it better. And if you and it doesn't solve it, but it actually generally highlights what's broken, so you can see it, and actually it gives you a chance to feedback loop as a leader or as a peer, but also gives the opportunity of someone to see what they're doing having an impact from day one. Um,
Mm.
and you start sort of like where you see there's a problem in the flow, for want of a better name for it, contribute to trying to make it more effective, more efficient. And it just starts, as I said, from that early life cycle, and it creates cultures of caring, of feedback being important, of you can make a difference. And I think that's kind of think how do you measure that? Don't know, but probably by speaking to that person at the end and saying, how have you found this experience? What would you do differently? Could we have made this better? And being crucial of yourself, I guess.
So can I jump in there? Because I know that you're an advocate and you're probably going to go into it because I am also an advocate about the impact. I think that the really key thing for measuring individual contribution is their impact on it. And you can put that impact, you can put a monetary value to a certain extent on impact. You can put impact on other people within the team. You can go impact on the project. You can go absolutely, really big on the impact. And I think that that's the sort of most measurable thing that can be measured by each individual.
Yeah. But I was going to take it a step further as well. And the impact that you make on that sort of engineer or tester experience, right? You should actually see the metrics change on your product as well. Because what I was trying to say earlier was the quality of all of that stuff, right, raises the performance of the people to produce higher quality on the actual products that they're building and testing. So in reality, could we look at those product metrics, the quality metrics, right? And see if we've improved flow, then the product metrics should change for the better.
Being devil's advocate, which I hate being, but I always am. Um, you might just see though that what happens is that the throughput time is shortened. So, for example, people get to speed faster, not that they become better. They get to the level, should we say, um, at a faster rate rather than necessarily changing your throughput or changing the quality of your product or the rest of it. You might not see necessarily a reduction in bug rate or something of that ilk. You might not see code quality go up and so on. But what you might see is a lower error rate from an individual to start with, or something like that. It might be hard to see. It depends on, like everything in it just depends.
Mm.
But I can, in my head, foresee it often. If it's the onboarding particular we're talking about more than anything else, you should see that be about almost getting to maximum efficiency. God, it sounds horrible talking about people like that. But getting efficient, like getting on board, understanding it, feeling part of the team, but getting to being great quickly rather than slowly. Whereas, yes, it could have an impact on the general overall quality of a product, the product as a whole, regardless of its quality or anything else. But I foresee more the onboarding is getting someone to the pace in which they can continue to deliver, sort of thing. And then after that, but if you train them right, I see your point, which is you've trained them, you've enabled them. Hopefully, then that will continue on. But actually, that's what you would hope people were already doing, if you know what I mean. If that was the culture,
Yeah.
so you're getting them to embed into the existing culture-ish. So I'm not sure whether you'd see complete quality or complete product changes, you probably wouldn't necessarily impact the general flow, in my head at least, but it would impact the flow of how fast you can onboard, get people up to speed, get them into the race, that sort of side of things. But it'd be
Yeah.
interesting. I'm not sure.
Well, where my head was going was that if you take onboarding, for example, right? If you improve the onboarding processes, and I don't just mean like getting through the checklists and reading the documents, but I'm talking about onboarding in terms of relationship building, inclusion, all this kind of stuff, right? It generally makes people happier, right? And happier people do produce higher quality output, right? That's where my head was at. Like, if you can improve, not just thinking about improving morale, but like we've spoken in the past about like how do you actually make a workplace joyful, right? One way of doing that is improving things like flow and processes and all this kind of stuff, right? And if people are more joyful in the work that they're doing, they don't pretend anything. They actually potentially are able to produce a better
There's more to
product.
it than that,
Ultimately,
though,
that's where
isn't
my
there?
head was at.
Because it's one thing enjoying what you're doing. There's another, which is an angle I see quite often. Actually, I see a bit more in where people are being forced down workflows and paths. It's not just AI things, but respect, being heard, and we talked a bit about value earlier, but also people knowing the value of their work, knowing, channeling their inner Backstreet Boys, so they are told why. They want to know why they're doing something, for whom, what good looks like in that case. Because I think if you understand the rationale behind the work that you're doing, why it's important, where the impact lies, where there are dependencies and stuff that you were going to unlock, that gives you more value to the work that you're doing as well. Because we don't want to feel like we're wasting our time. We don't want to feel like I'm just doing this thing to get through it. Like, you want to feel like you're doing something of value. We mentioned things like continuous improvement and stuff. We want to feel like we're doing better each day. People generally want to feel like what they're doing has a purpose, right? That, like, we exist for a reason, not just to get by. And I think a lot of that comes through. It's more than just communication, but it's understanding a bit more of that bigger picture, which is where we've come back to system thinking. But it's knowing where you fit within a whole system, why what you're doing is important to that whole bit, what the impact of you not doing it would be. Like, the number of times I've sat there and someone said, we got to do this thing. And you're like, what happens if we don't do it? Do you think anything's going to change? That's a really interesting and powerful question to consider in those instances, because like, leaks do happen. Coming back to our little pipe analogy, see, I did that, and you might not notice for an incredibly long time, and the damage that could be done can form rotting and ground damp and stuff if you don't pay attention, if you aren't looking at the right things, if you're not investigating. There can be a lot of rot at the core that is not uncovered if there isn't someone looking at the big picture, if there aren't these sort of audits and reviews and housekeeping and things across the whole system.
Just thinking Horizon. That was one where rocks got in and caused problems that was kind of ignored and pushed under and so on. And look at the cost of that in the long run.
Genuinely the reason why I refuse to wear the old Cambridge United shirt with Fujitsu across the front.
But for the context of our international listeners, the Fujitsu Horizon scandal is to do with our post office system costing millions and being covered up for many years.
So what would we do to improve flow? Would we, we're talking about obviously making better experiences for people. We're talking about the holistic side of things. We're not just talking about making a process better for software delivery. We've been talking about actually making processes better for humans, experiences better, making them more joyful, things like that. I know there's lots of, we've mentioned Dora metrics. There's Phoenix Project and things like that, theories of constraints. There's lots of different things about flow, which can apply to people, can apply to people processes as well as other processes. But is there anything that kind of springs to our imaginations of things that we kind of like to think about when we're looking at how we improve flow of people, systems, software, podcasts, you name it.
I mean, feedback we've talked about a little bit there, right? But if you think about mission critical things that exist in life, say, for example, fire alarm systems, those are things that are routinely checked. They are deeply looked into. They check end-to-end systems. They make sure that comms work. They make sure that entire processes are there. Because when you're fatigued, when you're tired, when you're maybe burnt out, the things that you have a routine, you just know exactly where you need to be. Those sorts of things are things you can do without having to engage your brain. It's why sports teams make you run through certain plays to the nth degree. It's how bands can play when they're exhausted because they do it over and over again. They practice things. Routinely servicing and finding out what your most important needs are, what your failure recovery processes are, and actually doing audits, investing time in, is this the right thing? Will this still work if? Investing time in those processes and then doing them over and over again. And back to my own point, because apparently that's what I'm doing now, telling people why it's important, showing them, making that visible so that people can see we do this thing, we check this thing, we regularly do it, we share our reports and things. That's why it's important. It's why it's important your car's MOT'd. It's why it's important you go for health checks with your body. Because if you leave something for too long, it will be too late.
The thing I was going to say about I think the fire alarm is quite a good example, but the problem with the fire alarm is that people revert to type. So many times when there is a fire alarm at work, people still don't use the fire exits. They don't go for the fastest route. They go down the route that they are used to
They
going
don't
out.
know why it's important because they
Exactly.
haven't had that reinforced. And
No,
that's because humans don't do as they're told. But neither does software. Let's
no,
be honest.
exactly.
That's why Happy Path doesn't work. But I think reinforcing that value, a bit of education goes a really long way. This is why this thing is
But
important.
but sort of going back to the whole flow thing, sometimes you can get blindsided by knowing what the sort of escape routes or the side paths. And again, with software testing, we look for the happy route, we look for the simple route. Sometimes we don't actually look for those edge cases that will mean that there are problems going down the path.
I actually think it could be a bit simpler. Like we look at when I'm thinking about like testers and testing skills and my very simplistic view on testing just being assessing quality, then if we look at flow, we look at poor flow being bugs, like things that bug us, bugs, right? Then we can apply our the exact testing skills that we apply to products, to processes, to organizational systems. So we already have the skills to be able to assess and diagnose problems, right? So then it's just about carrying that forward to trigger the improvements, right?
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I'm going to say the one thing that testers have learned over time, I think, is that we're humans and the users are humans. The people of all these systems and processes are humans. So what would a random human do? And that's a fantastic test for anything. And, HR systems, putting a human into them rather than a legal boffin machine thing to read and understand what's meant to be done, I think it's a fantastic thing because they go, well, what do you mean by that? What do you do that? That's ambiguous. That's this. And test of mind of questioning things that are unclear or could be construed in many ways is a fantastic way of looking at systems and looking about where they go right or wrong. Because the one thing that all systems have in common, even the automated mechanical ones, is humans are involved somewhere. Humans are either fixing them, even if not building them or creating them, but humans have generally been involved. Even the AI has been built by humans. There is a human fallibility in everything that we do. And just because it can go wrong, it will go wrong. Those sort of sentiments there. But testers bring in that kind of attitude, for want of a better word, and are very good at analyzing, critically analyzing, looking at flow, looking at system flow, looking at process flow, and going, well, what if, what if, what if, and raising questions that make answers. But and I'm going to put the downside to it as well, which is if you ever tried writing a process or system to count for every potential downfall, it's a nigh on impossibility. Language is so ambiguous; it is
It's
really
infinite,
really hard.
isn't it?
It's a hard game. So intent is a very valuable thing, and like we as testers have to learn where to draw a line, I guess sometimes, and think about kind of risk. I guess is probably the right way.
Risk,
Probability
risk
rather
is a
than
good one. Probability is a good one. Impact, like you said, is the
yeah
other one. Like, because things can go wrong, but
yeah. If someone's going to misconstrue something that could let them release something that could take out the entire system, you probably need some more safety nets around it, more improvements of that system. But if something matters whether a letter gets sent out with a full stop on it or missing or not, it's less important, if you see what I mean. Unless that change of punctuation is going to mean you pay someone £10 million rather than £10 or something. But you've got to be careful sometimes.
just sometimes, don't be reckless. But yeah, no.
You've got to
But
take risks
again,
where it makes sense.
but a lot of that comes with being appropriately informed about constraints, dependencies, value, and all
Upstream,
those
downstream.
things. And testers' inquisitiveness does lead us to being able to view more holistic pictures, more system thinking, possibly than other people, just because we're nosy and curious and interested.
I'm gonna. Can I be my devil's advocate again? Because
Oh, twice in
I
one
know
episode.
it's just part of me just gets like the narrative that we're saying just worries me slightly because we're not the only ones that are inquisitive out there. We're not the only people that actually have a lot of this mindset. And I firmly believe that a lot of developers have this mindset. A lot of people have these sort of things. We
Yeah,
value it as a profession probably more, but actually it's quite out there. But we go in with those skills, I think is what Dan was kind of talking about. We refine those skills quite heavily and so on, but we're not the only ones. I would say some, business analysts I work with are fantastic at that. Some of the system architects I've worked with are great at thinking full system pictures, but they need people of different types, backgrounds, diversities to help complete the picture. We all need assistance, I guess is the point. But I don't want to sing our hymns and praises too much, I guess is my point, because we're one of a team, we're one of many, and a lot of us have similar-ish skills of looking at systems and problems. But yeah, we are definitely more big picture than we are minute, where
but
some other
even the
specialisms are
four
more
of
minute.
us appraise systems and apply systems differently, and we all identify as testers
Yeah,
here. You put the four of us in the exact same job, we would do a very different job to each other.
exactly. But that's the human factor again, isn't it?
Yep, I agree with everything that you've said there, Russell. Like everybody applies the same sort of lateral critical thinking skills, right? I think the difference is coming from a perspective though where like engineers, and I've worked with like some of the best engineers as well, and but it's always coming from that builder's mindset. Like brilliant lateral thinking skills, there's 100 different ways that they could build this, and they're aware of all these different ways. And critical thinking skills from a construction perspective, right? Because they're in builder's mode. Whereas testers are often from that risk, pessimistic, destructive view. So finding
Yeah.
problems
They're
is
almost
an
the insurer
accident,
point of
right?
view. How much does this cost me if it goes
Yeah,
wrong?
yeah. But the other skill that I was going to mention is communication, right?
Mm.
Like testers have had to be resilient in a way where they're forced to have a better communication skills, even to log bugs, right? So having those communication skills, I'm thinking how that might help. Like it's not just about digging into processes; it's about doing some investigation and speaking to people and finding out how they feel about processes and systems and all that sort of stuff as well, their experiences. So that relationship building side of being a tester, often if you're one tester in a team of
It's a lot
engineers,
of things
right?
though, isn't it? Because I think and
Yeah.
and I'm conscious that David is looking at his watch, but there is a piece here that I wanted to just quickly touch on, which is really the one of the key things we want to strive for as testers is being a trusted advisor. Like when we say things, people trust that there is value in that, that we've appraised systems, that we've investigated, that we've looked at things, and that when we're speaking about something, people would listen to you. That isn't something that you just flick a switch and you've got. That's earned because of doing system thinking, by doing good work, by appraising systems well, by diving deeply, by showing that you understand technical systems and architecture and all of that, so that when you speak to that, people respect you, but they listen to you, and you are acting as a trusted advisor in that space. And I think that is really important, because I think a lot of people think that they're good communicators. And a lot of people are good communicators, but there sometimes there isn't so much gravitas, there's not so much grounding, there's not so much data to inform the rationale behind what you're talking about. Sometimes it can be like a finger in the air and go, oh, it's just a bit of this, that, and the other, but you're not backing it up. And I think we're also in an AI informed age where people will put stuff into something quite quickly, probably not review it, or give it a light pass, ask for a quick, summary done for us, and you lose credibility when you aren't known as someone that you can trust, that is detailed. And the best testers sometimes are the ones that encourage the developers to do a better job, because they know that you'll find something. And so they're more likely to listen to you. Like, the best tests are the ones that when they fail, you're like, oh crap, something's gone wrong, because you trust that the information that test is giving you about a failure comes with the credibility that it's actually giving me information of, oh crap, something's gone wrong. No, it's just a rubbish framework, it's a rubbish test. It doesn't really matter, it's just noise.
Thank you, Chris. And I'm not just looking at my watch, I'm thinking of the wonderful listeners' watches as well.
They can pause at any point to
Yeah,
pick up later,
Exactly. This has been a fantastic conversation that we've had. So thank you so much for Chris, Dan, and Russell. It's been an enjoyable time had. I hope everyone else listening has been inspired by the conversation. If you do want to reach out to us, please contact us via email. Contact us at testingpeers.com, or you can contact us through LinkedIn if you want to. Also, please don't forget PeersCon. So please book your tickets from the time that this episode comes out. In 8 weeks' time, it will all be over. On the 12th of March, we will be in Nottingham for PeersCon 3. And please do buy your tickets. All details are available on testingpeerscon.com. Tickets are still available. The program will either be released or very close to being released. So please do check us out and come and see us in the flesh, as it were. That leaves me to say thank you very much for listening, and Happy New Year, and we'll catch you again soon. All right.
For now, it's goodbye from the Testing Peers.
Goodbye.